On this episode of AV Week, what segments of the AV industry are going to be most impacted by IoT and AR? The importance of local support when growing globally, and distribution or direct. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 373, recorded Thursday, October 18th, 2018. Just right.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Sure, because every voice matters.
and by Extron Electronics.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to talk about the news and information we have gathered this week. First and foremost, an old friend that has been far too long gone on this program. His name is Joe Andrulis, and he works for Biamp. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's great to be back after my, I think, about 3-year hiatus from the AV broadcast tour. So excited to be back on board, joined Biamp, and we're loving life here in Portland and looking forward to a lot of exciting things.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe was part of the group that purchased Biamp last December, actually.
That's correct.
And also with us, an old friend as well. His name is Jimmy Paskey. Last time we saw him was in San Diego for CEDIA. So welcome, sir.
Yeah, I wish I had that weather going on today here in North Carolina. It's starting to feel like a winter just a little bit. But yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Jimmy works for Sojak. That's why we saw him last time. And since we're talking about weather, I'm in St. Louis, where it doesn't know if it wants to be 35 degrees or 45 degrees. So,
ooh, yeah. Okay, I'll take my weather instead.
It's weird. It was 95 last Monday. It was 95 degrees on Monday, and it was 55 on Friday. So it was like, finally decided to be fall. So, all right, guys. First story comes to us from our friends over at Commercial Integrator and Tom LeBlanc, talking about the trends in hotel room technology, AI, and the IoT, Internet of Things. Quote unquote, it wasn't that long ago that the typical hotel room technology consisted of an old school CRT and very confusing remote control. You'd leave your home and office where flat panel TVs were omnipresent and seemingly go back in time as you enter the hotel room. Tom goes on to write about how these hotel chains are utilizing AI, they're utilizing voice control, they're utilizing the IoT technology. And Joe, I'm going to start with you on this. What areas of the AV industry do we see kind of being disrupted? What verticals, I guess, besides hotel? And hotel is a fine example of that. Yeah. But what other areas are we seeing being disrupted by both AI and IoT?
I guess I wouldn't characterize it as being disrupted. I actually view this as a tremendous benefit, a wonderful trend for the AV industry. I mean, one of the challenges with the AV industry always is that AV was pretty complicated, right? You remarked about the remote controls in hotel room, which is a really, really simple form of AV in a kind of a residential type of setting. When you look at what we confronted in AV and SSR and other sorts of complicated settings, our poor users were confronted by a pretty unique, challenging experience, and they often failed for lack of experience, or each space was always a little bit different. So, this move towards AI, which was kind of a way to do anticipatory or context-sensitive control, as well as basically wider adoption of control through the adoption of IoT, I think is just lowering the barriers to being able to integrate devices together, provide users a much more, essentially educate users on how to control their experience in the environment, and generally have the environments do the control on their own. You did mention all the new technology going into hotel rooms, but I spent a lot of time in hotel rooms. And if I saw a trend, if anything, it's I touch fewer things these days. And it's basically because most things are just right. And they're right because they do have sensors, context-based control, AI, other things that basically ensure that my experience is going to be closer to something that's pretty satisfactory. We're going to see more of that in conference room technology and AV technology generally, so that people will fuss with things less and less. So I think it's all to the good.
Well, that actually brings up a really good point, Jimmy, is the Joe's experience as everything being just right. As a former programmer and a former tech manager, I know what kind of work it takes to get things like that, right? So is this a good opportunity for the AV integrator, for the commercial integrator, even the residential integrator, to get in and say, okay, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, you want things just to kind of happen. That's great. It's going to be a little bit more because there's a lot more back end. How then do we educate the customer about this? Yes, we can do this, but there might be a price point change to that.
Yeah, I think it does nothing but secure the jobs and into the foreseeable future. Programming is everything, and I've learned that just by getting demonstrations across the U.S. You'll hear somebody say a command one way, and then you'll hear it said a different way at another shop, down the road. And I think about maybe the educational environment, or where we're coming into a conference room, corporate America. One person will say a command one way, and another will say it quite differently. And I think programming has to be flexible enough to allow for that kind of versatility to drive the result that we're all looking for ultimately. Bringing the lights up, turning the projector on, getting the conference room ready for a meeting or for education or for whatever it might be that we're using it for.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Our next story comes to us from our friends over at Innovate on the Net. Biamp, Joe's company, is adding to their European team from the article. Building on a recent addition to its European sales team, Biamp has appointed Sandra Kellerman to support its sales channel throughout Eastern Europe and the Nordic countries. Joe, this is a recent hire for you guys, a recent hire for you. And I want to start with you on this, because you guys have been doing some expansion as well. Serge has also been doing some expanding. But one thing that has kind of been a thread, at least for us in our coverage throughout the last 12 months, honestly, has been the globalization of AV, whether it's integrators who are expanding overseas or manufacturers who are putting out more support staff. How important is it for a manufacturer who is seeing not only their U.S. clients expanding beyond the U.S. borders, but also seeing integrators who they're connecting with, newly or reconnecting with across the globe? How important is it to have that local support when you're expanding globally?
It's essential. Essentially, it's unavoidably essential. You mentioned two phenomena that are related to one another, but really distinctly different. One is, globalization generally, right? We're all trying to sell our solutions around the world. But even more importantly, it's the globalization of some of our most important clients. And so even if you would like to say, well, I'm a North American distributor or a European distributor, the fact that some of your biggest clients are not isolated to one domain means somehow, some way, you need to find a way to go and support them in these other geographies. It's also very, very critical, especially with these large global companies, that they have a very uniform experience across all their different departments. They've got people that move across borders and go to these various offices. They want their people to be effective in all those different locations. So standardization of the deployments, standardization of the experiences within those room spaces is something they're mandating. And the only way to ensure that is to make sure that some of the entities that persist across all these different geographies, like the manufacturers, are committed to the success of the integrators, because not all integrators have that same sort of global footprint. So we need to step in and support the local integrators so that the objectives of the global customers are all met. That only enhances our ability to support their work that is truly local within these geographies as well. So any work we do in support of the globals tends to carry over and benefit us in the local markets as well. So it is essential. Certainly Biamp as a brand in particular is kind of known for ensuring customer success, right? I mean, that's above and beyond just great products. We want to ensure the great products deliver the experiences that we promise that they will. And that requires handholding and stepping in and ensuring that shortfalls or confusion or other sorts of glitches that happen in the real world are patched up by us. And we're going to continue to go and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jimmy, I want to talk about a slight difference on this. Biamp makes devices that obviously require power. Surgex is that's what they do, is they handle power. Not to be too simplistic about this, but I've learned the hard way more than once that there is different power in different parts of the world. So how do you then make sure that you do maintain a uniform experience, like the phrase that Joe used, while also making sure that your systems and your products work regardless of where they are?
Yeah, well, I think kind of like in my experiences here in the States, each little area has their own little nuances. I was talking to a gentleman in San Francisco last night, and he mentioned lightning. I said, well, we don't really have a lot of lightning in Northern California, but what you do get is a lot of brownouts. And so having somebody established, in the pockets regionally out in Europe and other countries certainly helps, because you get a real sense of what the issues are or might be. And then obviously being accredited appropriately so that your certification for each country is appropriate enough to limit any liability that somebody might have by plugging into one of our products. That's also key. And then last part is people still like dealing with people. So, having a face that's local, that somebody understands the person, the relationship, that the understanding of the region is there, as opposed to maybe somebody coming over from North America that just gets to go, once a quarter or once a year to give some face time. I think it's crucial, no matter what region we happen to be working in.
You mentioned something there about being accredited locally. In the U.S., we have different certifications. Obviously, in Europe, they have different certifications depending on which part of Europe. They also have different ones. Japan has different ones. China has ones. Is that something that you guys go after, and you say, "Hey, we want to get into this market"? Let's say India, for example. We want to get into the India market or the China market. What certifications do we need, or is that a pushback from your clients that say, "Hey, we want to use your product in XYZ country, but we need these certs"?
Yeah, well, it goes both ways. With the acquisition in 2016 of Surgex folding into Amatec, who's very much a global company, it's one of the first questions we are going to ask ourselves is, yes, we would like to participate in Brazil or Australia or wherever, but, A, can we? Right out of the gate, do we have the certifications to be able to do it? B, in many cases, do we have the resources? Is there already an established office space? Is there an established distribution network that we can tie into? And actually, it just helped us with relationships in Australia here very recently, this past month. But certainly it's coming from us. Also, it will come from the customer. If it doesn't come out of our mouths first, that'll be the first thing they ask. We'd love to use your product. It seems like great product. Will we be in trouble if something happens because of some certification that may not be there?
All right, very good. Next story here comes to us from our friends over at Sound of Communications. Almo Pro AV has been named the exclusive U.S. distributor of IMAG systems. If you're not familiar with IMAG systems, they're an AV over IP delivery products. They use the SDVOE Alliance protocol for that. Couple questions here. Jimmy, we'll start with you on this. First and foremost, what are some of the benefits and drawbacks of a manufacturer going exclusively with one distributor, maybe in a particular country, in a particular region?
We just went through this on the pro side here in the States. And it's working out great. I mean, at the end of the day, our larger customers kind of dictate that the tightness on that supply chain is ever more tight, so they want to be able to have the product just kind of flowing as they need it, as opposed to holding on to inventory. And of course, these days in manufacturing, yes, we have some inventory, but it's nothing like, maybe what we would hope to have as salespeople in the field. Yeah. It's an ebb and flow, and it's a delicate balance, but we've certainly benefited from the move in June here in the States, where we were able to partner up with Herman Pro AV, and they've been great for us. They were great for us for the several years that we had a relationship with them while we were dealing with direct customers, and then also them as a distribution partner.
Joe, this actually kind of goes back to a little bit to the global chat we had. Here in the States, there's two different mechanisms. There are certainly direct from manufacturer relationships, and there is also distribution. At least in the UK and in Europe, distribution is almost entirely how folks get products, whether it's buy-in products or Surgex or whoever. So, what same kind of question is what why would a company maybe diversify over various distribution methods, I guess is the best way to put this. Or maybe they want to say that, oh, this is how we do it. This is the one way you can get us.
I mean, every company is going to perhaps have its own philosophy. And speaking for BIAMP, we have a very clear way in which we think through those trade-offs. We make a decision to either go direct or go through distribution. Either way we go, it's our philosophy that you are dealing with BIAMP. And because of that, that's why our philosophy then carries forward and says, well, if we choose to go with the distributor, it's an exclusive distributor because we go all in with the distributor we think best represents the BIAMP values and is able to go and represent BIAMP most effectively. And we don't want the distributor to think that we are split our commitment or that we're somehow uncertain about their ability to deliver. We go all in with their distributor so that anybody doing business with that distributor can feel that they are doing business with BIAMP. If the market economics, size, so forth, suggests that a direct presence is more efficient, then we go in with the direct presence, and we don't generally complement it with a distributor as well. So it's an either or, all in commitment from BIAMP.
And is that, not to get into too much in the weeds here, but that's region wide or country wide when you make that decision? Yes.
And generally the trade-off comes that if we have a large enough book of business where we can justify a local office, then we'll generally or quite often favor local office. For somebody who has the reach and established relationships with integrators in a market where we don't have a large book of business yet, then it's a lot more efficient and effective for us to go through a distributor.
All right, very good. Last story here comes to us from AV Magazine. Uber is deploying 850 rooms, 850 rooms, with Zoom and Panicast, two cameras. If you're not familiar with Panicast, everybody's familiar with Zoom. It's what we're using here to record. Panicast has this a camera that lets you span a very wide percentage of the room. This is a quote from the head of collaboration and AV services at Uber. You have 5 chairs per huddle room. If 2 are not in the camera, meaning you can't see them in the field of view, then those 2 chairs are not usable and you've lost 2 seats at the table. Literally. I want to hone in on something. First of all, I want to hone in on the fact that Uber, a very large tech firm, has a head of collaboration and AV services. I think that's pretty cool, right? The fact that a large tech firm has somebody in that position that says this is important to us. Make sure that we have somebody in that position that knows what they're talking about and can speak AV and IT and bring the two together. But Jimmy, a wider question for the commercial integrators that are listening to this. This is 850 rooms, right? 850 systems, 850 huddle spaces. It's a large deployment, and that didn't happen overnight. My question, though, is from you and Joe, how do integrators get into the room? How do they get into that meeting that happens that says, yes, we're going to do 850 rooms, and you, ABC integrator, are going to get this job?
I think many times we get into projects like this through our consultant network. And I would hope that even if Uber has its IT and AV guru, that guru hopefully reached out to a consultant to say what would be the best way to approach such a large-scale project. If they had experience in that, maybe they'd have some knowledge as to how to deploy and execute, but probably not, given their background. I'd say reach out to a consultant, see the best way to get accomplished fitting all the chairs into the meeting. And then hopefully that consultant then is giving the end user, the best experience they can for whatever price point they're trying to accomplish, and ultimately the result that they want to get through. It looks like a couple TVs, a camera, and a mission control tablet there, right? So consulting is probably our niche and the go-to strategy, working through that network of consultants across the U.S. and trying to get into larger scale projects like this.
Joe, same kind of question as we wrap up here. How do you get into the room where big projects like this are kind of set out and awarded?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with everything Jimmy just described. We certainly don't take for granted that there's any one fixed model that's going to work. And so we stay actively involved with all the major participants in the conversation. And there's kind of four of them, right? I mean, there's the end user themselves, of course. And sometimes, like with Uber, they've committed to developing an internal house or a capability that's pretty sophisticated. Other times, not so much. Consultants are a very, very heavily utilized channel for doing unique and large installations like an 850 room deployment. Integrators are sometimes brought in to implement that and sometimes brought in earlier to help construct that. So obviously we want to be very, very tight with them. And then honestly, the manufacturers themselves, we don't isolate ourselves from any of those communities. We actively involve ourselves, keep on the lookout for those programs. We're happy to go in and be a point of introduction for some of them. So for some of these other entities like the consultants and the integrators, there are instances where that happens, where we just happen to bump into an end user and we do get to kind of kick it off. But just as often, we're supporting one of these other channels. So we keep active links to all of them. These big projects are rarely one person's decisions or one entity's. It is really a collaboration between all those communities, and the winner is going to be the one who effectively can operate within all of them.
Well, and that is really the trick, right? Is getting all the disparate folks who are not only responsible, but they have a stakeholders in these organizations that says, yes, I want this or I want that. How do we make that happen, and how do we most successfully and economically make this happen? All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. Thank you both so much. Mr. Joe Andrulis from BIAMP, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
How do people find you and or BIAMP?
Well, you can find me personally on LinkedIn. Just search for Joe Andrulis. Very few Andrulises, so you should have no problem. But Joe Andrulis at BIAMP. And BIAMP generally at www.biamp.com. And of course, we hope to see many of you at ISE, which is only 4 short months away now. So we should have lots of things that get people excited. So please stop by.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Paschke, sir, thank you, sir. How do people find you and or Surgex?
Well, first, let's go to the website espsurgex.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well, Jimmy Paschke. Be glad to help anybody with questions, steer them towards the right, most appropriate contact in our company. Thanks, Tim, for having me, by the way.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me on Twitter's because at this point I'm complaining about the Bears defense. If you would please, AVNation.tv, You'll find this program and a host of others. Next few weeks, honestly, is going to be all about digital signage for us. And then, as Joe mentioned, ISE shortly thereafter. But we'll be in New York City for New York Digital Signage Week, also for NEC's 25th anniversary showcase. And then a couple weeks after that, we're doing our next webinar on digital signage and digital signage creation, content creation for the AV integrators. So check that out. Also, while you're there, check out our underwriter section. These are the folks who help us financially, help us go to New York Digital Signage Week and ISE and everything else. And BIAMP is one of those. So we thank them for their support. So find all that and more at AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for AV Week.